Good evening, guys. Welcome back into another installment of Saturday Showdown. I'm Caleb. We've got Dylan here, and today we're going to be talking about some of the biggest matchups that are going to be happening in college football this season. And there's a lot of good ones that we're going to talk about here. But before we jump into that, I want to get with you, Dylan. We just going off of how we ended last week, talking about NCAA 25 coming back. We talked about potential teams we'd like to rebuild, and I was going to come back to you on this one before we dive in here with our main talk. So what do you got for us?
I had two teams. One, because I had just been I watched the movie, so I was like, oh, you know what, that wouldn't be a bad football team because they're absolutely terrible. So like Marshall, I'd watch We Are Marshall, a couple days after, and so I was like, yeah, you know what, they're pretty bad. So, and that'd be kind of a cool story, because they used to be a really good football team, way back in the day, and there's a lot of history there. And then I don't know why, but when I was doing some research for the episode today, I saw Kennesaw State, and I don't think I've ever heard of them I don't think I've ever heard of that team ever, actually. So it'd probably be one of those. One, just lean toward Marshall because I would watch the movie and I know who they are, and I know there's a lot of rich history behind that team. But Kennesaw State, I think that'd be a pretty good because Kennesaw State Owls. I've never even heard of that team. I don't think ever.
I was about to say, I just know them from their appearance they made either this past year or the year before in the NCAA tournament. So.
Yeah, so just as long as if you play that game, just as long as you take a team like that, it's no fun playing like the Ohio States or the Alabamas or the Texas, Yeah,
got to give yourself a challenge.
Exactly, especially if you build a dynasty. Then who knows? Become a Kennesaw State, and then 10 years from now, like move to the SEC or something, and then start playing against teams like that. That'd be fun. So
exactly, yeah. And so we'll hit some recruitment news before we dive into these matchups that we're going to talk about. The big one we were just talking about before we hopped on here is Georgia made a very interesting addition to its 2024 class, as today they had former elite basketball recruit Jazir Jackson, a 6'11" offensive tackle that is 330. He stands among one of the tallest players in college football. Talk about a big addition for an already huge and stacked Georgia team.
Yeah, that's did you say basketball recruit? Is that what you said?
Former elite basketball recruit.
So this man was in the post at 6'11", 330 pounds. Okay. And then now he's an offensive lineman for the best team in college football.
I was about to say, it doesn't even seem fair, does it?
Absolutely not. That's incredible, actually, to be 6'11", 330 pounds. So not just a tall dude, but you're big. And then to be on the offensive line, that doesn't seem fair at all. At all.
Yeah. I was about to say the rich get richer, if you will, with some talent. Now, with him being a basketball recruit, it'll be interesting to see how well versed he is in his ability to play football. But that size alone is it's going to be hard to compete with that if you can teach him some of the fundamentals of basic offensive line play. Even if he has hardly played football, I'm sure with his size, he was probably a dual sport. With a guy that size, you cannot. It's hard for me to see him not being a basketball and football player, but he's one of those guys that could be, with him being a late addition, I think probably a good depth piece for that Georgia team.
Yeah, and guys like him, I would say that they have, I guess, what you would call natural athletic ability. So he's probably just one of those guys that's good at basically everything he probably does. It is very comparable to, I can't think the guy's name off the top of my head, but he was the Olympic wrestler who just went to the Buffalo Bills, and he's going to play football for the Buffalo Bills. I don't think he's played a lick of football basically his entire life. Maybe some high school, but I don't think he ever played at the college level. And if he did, it was very minimal. And they, the Buffalo Bills took him on, and that's another guy that is just a natural athlete and just good at everything he does. And if you can just teach him some fundamentals, like you just mentioned, yeah, they'll probably, if they take it seriously, they'll probably turn out to be pretty good. So,
Yeah, that's 100% true there. And as we keep talking about commitments, as we jump from the SEC to the Big Ten, you had Oregon get their own fireworks on the 4th of July as they received a commitment from 5-star wide receiver DeCorian Moore. Thursday night, they beat out Texas, LSU, and Ohio State for the pledge of the number 1 wide receiver and the top uncommitted prospect for the 2025 class.
that's huge for Oregon, especially coming into a new conference where you're gonna need big recruitment classes to keep up with these other big schools. You know, Ohio State and Michigan over the last couple of years have been, especially Ohio State has been, a top 5 recruiting class, if not in the top, 6 at least every year. And Michigan, the last handful of years, especially under Jim Harbaugh, has definitely been top recruiting classes. Penn State has decent classes. So going up against a lot of these bigger schools now, that's very important for them. So they definitely got something huge there. Being in a new conference, they're gonna need some big recruits to try to keep up with these guys. So
100%. And, Oregon's one of those teams, too. I always think of, when I think about Oregon, a fast paced offense, but an offense that usually has pretty good receivers.
yes.
With an offense the style that they play, you've got to have really good receivers to be able to, put up as many points as they do and spread the ball around like they do, and just like you said, I think it's one of those things where, they're trying to step up their game coming into this new conference where they're, like you said, having to compete with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, teams like that. He comes in at 5'11", 185 pounds. He joins the Ducks as the program's ranked 11th in the recruiting class, which is Dan Lanning's highest since he's been at Oregon. And it is Oregon's highest rated commitment since they had Kayvon Thibodeau as the number 1 overall recruit in 2019.
Yeah, that's so you said 5'11", 185 pounds. That doesn't, like you said, that doesn't really surprise me for Oregon. They always have the, I won't say shorter, but they have the shorter, speedy guys. And it seems like even when Brian Kelly was there, that's basically the type of offense that they like to run. Obviously you need tall guys as well, but they always had they were always known for their speed. So it doesn't surprise me that they land the number 1 wide receiver in the draft class coming up. A lot of these guys, maybe it doesn't have to do with NIL deals anymore. Maybe they're not focused on that, but a lot of those guys, they pick colleges like this, that fit their skill set best. So that was definitely a big hookup for Oregon. Like I said, I know I've mentioned it twice, but especially in the conference that they're in now, they got to keep up with They got to keep up with Ohio State. So that's huge for them. That was huge.
I was about to say, you're talking about college football's version of keeping up with the Joneses here with, what they got to go up against. So, and as we continue, Miami got itself a top commit on Friday afternoon when they beat out Michigan and Nebraska to get a commitment from one of the top interior offensive linemen, SJ Alafatuli. He is a 5-star offensive guard from Nevada's Bishop Gorman High School and the number 10 overall prospect in the 2025 ESPN 300. He's 6'3", 285. He took a visit to Miami, and he is the Hurricanes' 2025 highest rated commit so far.
Really? So even Miami's out here making some moves. And that,
I was about to say, everybody's having to step up their games here, and in this landscape, everybody's trying to get more competitive.
And that actually kind of surprised me. Being one of the top 3 schools that this kid obviously wanted to go to, one of them being Michigan. You would think that some of these kids would probably pick a better rated school, but you never know what can happen in college football. And Miami, not I won't say too soon ago, but many years ago, they were, considered, they might have actually had one of the best college teams ever. I can't remember who was on it, but I know you had like Ed Reed, Devin Hester. You had a lot of these guys like all on the same team. So yeah, that was I didn't see that one, but that's actually pretty cool to see that even Miami is, making some moves on top recruits.
Yeah. And then the next one here is one you probably don't want to hear is Michigan flipped the commitment of 4-star cornerback Ivan Taylor from Notre Dame on Monday to themselves. He's the number 41 in ESPN's 300 and the 5th ranked quarterback in his class. He had originally pledged to Notre Dame on December 1st of 2023. And now he is flipped to Michigan. He's 6 foot 175 defensive back coming to that Michigan defense.
Yeah, that's always sad to see when Michigan gets a top. I mean, I know they're going to get top recruits, right? We know they're going to get top recruits. I mean, they just won a national championship. They did lose. They did lose a lot, but they just won a national championship. They play in a good conference. They play a lot of notable teams. They're in the spotlight quite often. A lot of people who are a lot of kids who are trying to show their talent, and hoping to get seen and drafted into the NFL. That might be something that they look at and seeing how much how much spotlight they can get. So it doesn't surprise me that Michigan is going to get guys like this, because why wouldn't you go to a team that just won a national championship and plays big notable teams and has a spotlight? But I hate to hear it every time. So.
And then as we kind of wrap up here, gotta love the opportunity to talk about my Arkansas Razorbacks here, as on July 2nd, they received a commitment from 4-star linebacker Tavian Wallace out of Georgia. He was very highly predicted to go to Florida State, but ended up picking Arkansas over the likes of Florida State, Florida, Georgia, and Arizona. So Arkansas getting a big time linebacker there, 6'1", 215, that he is ranked in number 36 nationally, 3rd linebacker overall for next year's class. He's definitely going to bring some much needed help to Arkansas's linebacker room that's very young. So another talented guy that Arkansas can add, as they're trying to stay competitive, and what we now see is going to be a very competitive SEC this year with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma.
Real quick to wrap that up, how do you feel about that? How do you feel knowing that you guys got the number 36 overall, but number 3rd linebacker in the class, as you said? But how do you feel knowing that you beat out teams like FSU and Georgia, and he's a Georgia boy? I mean, how do you feel beating out big name teams?
I'm honestly very surprised. I mean, I'm excited about it. It's just like the video of our defensive coordinator once that he saw the commitment, just started running up and down the hallway of the football center. But it's one of those things where I'm hoping that maybe that we're trying to take a turn here. Defensively, ever since we brought in Travis Williams from UCF a couple seasons ago, our defense has improved every season under him. And, he was known to be a very good recruiter coming in. And I think he's continuing to do that. And he's a linebackers coach by trade. So it's a position that he played. He knows how to recruit. And so I think it's one of those things that I think he's trying to build a good linebacker room here at Arkansas. We did that in a transfer portal, going out and getting one of the top linebackers in the transfer portal with Xavier Sorey coming over from Georgia, a guy that, it's the second season in a row we've been able to get a Georgia defender via the transfer portal, with Xavier Sorey this year and Jaheim Singletary last year as a defensive back. So, he's going after some of the top talents, and, I'm hoping in the next couple of years that'll definitely pay off.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. I am also surprised. Nothing against Arkansas, but I'm just surprised that they beat out teams like Georgia. So, especially when you said he's from Georgia, so that's very interesting. But good. That's good for Arkansas. I'm glad they're also another team that's trying to make a big turnaround in the football program. So,
yeah, much needed. And so with that, we'll transition and start talking about some of these top games we're ready to watch in 2024. And I think the first one we're going to talk about here, easily for me anyway, takes the number 1 spot, as it's supposed to be an electric game, and that's going to be Georgia versus Texas here on October 19th. We talked about that on the last episode where I had that circled. I think, this is going to be a big game, and I think more than Georgia versus Texas, I think this game could really turn into Carson Beck versus Quinn Ewers. I think that's what the storyline could be around this game, as both those guys are expected to be and will be going into the season Heisman candidates. And, arguably I could see by this date these two teams potentially being 1 and 2 or easily both being in the top 5 going into this matchup. And, what it's going to be a crazy storyline going into this matchup with not only two potentially top 5 teams, but also two Heisman candidates battling it out with each other to essentially put their name in as one of the finalists at the end of the year and take their teams to potentially a conference title as well as, those playoff hopes.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I would have to agree. This is probably going to be, even though, like I said, I am an Ohio State fan, this is probably going to be one of the top games on my watch list. You're decent little ways, you're decent ways into the season. So, like you said, this could even determine who wins the SEC. This could be the game right here, because I would expect Georgia probably comes into this game probably undefeated. And there's probably a decent chance that Texas probably comes into this game undefeated. I won't say that they will be, but I would say, there's a chance that both these guys don't have a loss on the record yet. This game could determine who wins the SEC, and like you said, I definitely do think it's going to be Carson Beck versus Quinn Ewers. But Kirby Smart is definitely going to have it's definitely going to be a coaching battle. Kirby Smart and Steve, how you say his last name? Sarkisian. So, and then, Jaden Blue, running back for Texas, he's going to have a lot on his hands. And then I also forgot that Georgia got Trevor Etienne as well from Florida. So I forgot about that. I 100% did. I forgot about that. So I think those 4 players they're going to be huge for their team, especially since both teams like to run the ball. But I 100% agree with you. I definitely think it is going to be a coaching battle, but it is going to come down to Beck versus Ewers and which quarterback can lead their team to victory and possibly with a win, whichever quarterback gets a win, potentially have the SEC wrapped up. So,
I agree 100% there. Like you said, I think that coaching battles can be interesting because you've got Sarkisian that's kind of an offensive guru type coach versus Kirby Smart that is very much the defensive guy. He was the defensive coordinator at Alabama for the longest time before he decided to take the Georgia job. And so, you got an offensive mind versus defensive mind. But, both these guys have those key coaches on the staff that are on the flip side of what they are. So, like Kirby Smart's got plenty of offensive minded people on his staff that, you've seen the offense that they can produce and vice versa for Texas, that they have plenty of great defensive coaches. So it's going to be a great battle overall. And like you said, I think this could determine potentially who wins the SEC and which of these winning quarterbacks potentially solidifies themselves as a Heisman finalist or a contender towards the end of the season.
100% agree.
So we'll jump over to our next game here with Ohio State versus Oregon. This definitely is going to be an interesting game as you have Ohio State traveling to Oregon first time in the Big Ten. Early test here, midseason test here for the Ducks as, they're taking on easily one of the probably top 2 teams in the Big Ten between them and Michigan. It's a conference game this year. That just sounds weird to say that this is a conference game now, but you've got 2 teams that are going to be very, very tough. And, if you look at Ohio State's 9-1 all time against Oregon, and that lone loss was in Columbus during the 2021 season. So, Ohio State's record versus Oregon is pretty good. We'll see how these teams match up with, Oregon coming over and having, we talked about it before, that fast-paced, quick offense and how they compete against a, Big Ten type of team with Ohio State's defense and also what Ohio State's going to be doing offensively.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's definitely going to be an interesting game. This definitely might be Oregon's big test for this conference. Ohio State is always notably known to have a good defense, offense as well. But we've always had a really good defense, and Oregon has been known to not have a great defense. They played a lot of good teams where they can put up 60 points, 70 points a game. But they get into they get into some of these other matchups, where teams can score back. That offense just can't keep up with Oregon in itself. So it'll be interesting to see how they go up against a real defense. And Ryan Day and Dan Lanning, that coaching battle is going to be an interesting one to keep your eye on. And it's going to be interesting to see how Will Howard plays in a big game like this, because I would imagine this is going to be, it's midseason. It's going to be a big game. Ohio State undoubtedly will probably be undefeated at this point, I would imagine. And it wouldn't surprise me if Oregon was undefeated at this point. So also, this is another big game. This could be a game, this late in the season that could possibly determine who wins. So, and then Judkins and Judkins especially. I think Judkins is. I don't know. I don't know who's going to be the leading running back there yet. You had the transfer from Ole Miss, Judkins, and then I think Travion Henderson's still there. But yeah, so Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel. I like Dylan Gabriel's overall ability better than Will Howard's. It's going to be interesting to see how he fits in that Oregon offense. But yes, this is going to be another huge game that I think could even potentially decide who wraps up, their own conference. So.
Yeah, it goes back to it's hard to believe this is a conference game this year. Like you said, it'll be interesting to see who kind of gets the bulk of those carries, like you were saying, between Judkins and Travion Henderson. It's interesting with Henderson coming back. You have Judkins that decides to leave Ole Miss, that themselves are going to have a pretty stacked team this year to join an Ohio State team that is going to be as equally talented there. And like you said, this could have interesting implications as far as Big Ten, especially with you don't really know what Michigan's going to be with a new head coach and how that program's going to be. Ohio State has Ryan Day returning, new quarterback, so it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But, I could easily see this being another one of those electric games that will be one of the easily premier games in college football in 2024. Next up, we have Notre Dame versus USC. An interesting matchup, to say the least, as these are two very storied programs, that both have their own history in, some form or fashion. You saw Notre Dame last year come out and, have a very good start to the season. A few games did not go their way. And then vice versa, USC did not have the season that they thought they would. Caleb Williams returning, for another season. Everybody thought they were going to be one of the top teams that would come out and be able to just run away in the Pac-12, and they didn't. Kind of a dismal year for them because they did not have a defense of any kind. So, quick thoughts on, this matchup here. It's a matchup of two very storied programs.
Yeah, 100%, 100% agree. Especially, Marcus Freeman as Notre Dame's head coach. I won't say he's bad, but I don't think he's lived up to the potential that people thought he was going to be right now. But they did get Riley Leonard, so I think that's an interesting quarterback placement for him. I think if he can replicate what he did at Duke, he's going to be he's going to have better overall talent around him. So I think he'll do better here at Notre Dame. As far as USC. I don't think they've come out and flat out said who their starting quarterback is going to be. I know during some spring training and stuff, Lincoln Riley said that Miller Moss was going to be that they're, if he was to choose right now, he would be the starter. But I know they have Jaden Maeva. I don't know how to say his last name, but I know that he's there too. So I know it's between those two guys basically. But I know that we both had Notre Dame in our top 10, I think. So I picked this game because I wanted to talk about this game because I think that if USC can be good again, I think this will be a real test for Notre Dame, especially if they are as good as what we think they will be. this will definitely be a test for them to see if they can finally overcome that. Because, like you said, like you had mentioned, they had a couple games last year that they probably should have won, and then it did not go their way. One of them being Ohio State. They completely fumbled that game. So if USC is good, this could have some implications on Notre Dame season as well as USC's. I don't want to leave them out of it. So.
Yeah, very true. Like we said, it'll be interesting to see who is the next guy under center for USC after, you had Caleb Williams there for a couple of seasons, Heisman winner, now taking over as the quarterback for your Bears. It'll be interesting to see what the drop off is, his talent compared to kind of this guy stepping up. And like you said, Notre Dame getting an experienced guy to come in, and replace Sam Hartman with Riley Leonard, a guy that was very impressive last year at Duke. Marcus Freeman got him an experienced guy out of the portal, kind of just like he did with Sam Hartman, getting him from Wake Forest. It's going to be interesting, and I think this has the chance to be a very good game, as we'll see what these two programs are. Like we said, Notre Dame, we have them both have them in our top 10. Can they live up to that hype? This is a November game, so it's going to be late in the season. Is Notre Dame going into this game one loss, maybe undefeated potentially, compared to what is USC like? Are they kind of just middle of the pack, or are they struggling, or are they surprising some people? So I think this could be a very interesting late season matchup, as it is in late November, and could hold some potential playoff implications for Notre Dame.
Agreed.
We'll jump over to one of the biggest games in college football every year, Michigan versus Ohio State. I mean, there was not a way to not have this game on the list. It's easily right up there with Texas and Georgia. This could potentially be one of those matchups that, again, when you look at it, could have a lot of factors as far as the playoffs. It's going to be interesting to see the storylines between the Harbaugh's successor coming in and replacing him for a team that just won the national title versus Ohio State, a team that always, plays this game tough. And it is back at Ohio State this year as it was at the Big House last year. So it's home turf for you guys. What do you think?
Yeah, this is a game. This is a game I look forward to, and then I dread at the same time. We've lost, I think, the last 3 years in a row. So, and we've been undefeated basically up to that point. And then we lose, and then we're not in the college playoffs anymore. And it happens every year, and it happens to Michigan, and I can't stand it. But it is going to be interesting. We all know who Ryan Day is, but it'll be interesting to see. This is going to be obviously end of the season matchup. So it's going to be interesting to see how Will Howard has performed up to this point, considering we don't know what he's going to do in a bigger conference like this. It's going to be interesting to see the running back situation between Judkins and Travion Henderson, who's going to be the starter. They'll be sharing carries. But also, like you said with Michigan, Sherman Moore, we don't even know what kind of coach he is. What is he going to want to do? Is he going to be like more run oriented? Is he going to be a balanced pass game? Is he going to want to focus on defense? Donovan Edwards, that guy's a freaking stud. He sat behind Blake Corum. That was the biggest thing in his career, because when that kid gets the ball, he's explosive. And then as far as their quarterback play, I haven't seen like a committed starter yet. I saw Jack Tuttle's name tossed around a little bit. But I haven't seen anything like super solidified for Michigan. But I'm hoping Ohio State can get the win this year. Every year, all right, because this is the Saturday following Thanksgiving, and we have my wife's dad's Thanksgiving then. So I'm at the table with my phone, and I have the game playing on my phone, and I don't talk to anybody every year, and I just watch this game, and people get so interested in what's happening, like my facial expressions and what I'm doing, because the last 3 years, basically, we've lost, and everyone's always like, oh, maybe next year, Dylan, maybe next year. And it hurts me so bad. Every year it's a loss every year. So this is definitely my game to watch this year, but I'm thinking Ohio State's probably going to take this one this year, but I've said that every year the last couple years, and it hasn't happened. So
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Like you said, the biggest question mark for me going in this is not only that head coaching question mark. You know what you're getting with Donovan Edwards, a guy that is a extremely talented running back that, like you said, sat behind Blake Corum, an equally talented quarterback. And I think that's where the question mark for me is for Michigan. They're having to replace, JJ McCarthy, a talented quarterback that, we got drafted high, could be the potential starter as a rookie for the Vikings. But, they've got a couple guys on this roster that, could be guys that will take over that spot. You think about, like you said, Jack Tuttle, he's a grad transfer that comes in. You got Alex Orji, a guy that we saw some last year that, is a very talented, 6'3", 236 as your quarterback. That's insane.
It's pretty good.
And I don't know. It's just going to be one of those things. It's going to be interesting to see who he goes with, and kind of like you said, what type of style offense does he choose to go with? With a guy like Donovan Edwards, you go a run heavy offense. Is one of these quarterbacks going to come out here and kind of, have a big arm and throw the ball all over the field to some talented wide receivers? It's just going to be interesting to see. And like you said, on the flip side, that Ohio State has a question mark at quarterback as well. They got an experienced guy like Will Howard that came in from Kansas State, like we said on the last episode, hasn't necessarily played in big time situations like he will see at Ohio State. So how does he handle that pressure? And then, like you said, that running back battle between Henderson and Judkins, November 30th, definitely is going to be a big game. It's interesting that we have two of the biggest games we talked about on the same day here. So, there's going to be a lot of good football to watch on November 30th.
100%.
We'll jump to our next matchup, Georgia versus Alabama. This is an interesting one because you've got Kirby Smart, former Alabama coach, versus the new Nick Saban-less Alabama Crimson Tide that has a first-year head coach, Kalen DeBoer. We all know, what he's about, coming in from Washington, taking them to the playoffs last year, a guy that really wins everywhere he's been. But now is he ready for this new challenge as he steps into one of, if not the toughest college jobs to be a successor in my opinion, that, how does he handle the pressure of the SEC, but also going up against easily the top team in the SEC that has, a two-time title winning team in the past, 3-4 years? How does this matchup turn out? You've got, Carson Beck returning for Georgia. You've got Jalen Milroe returning for Alabama. What does he do under a new system? Does he perform better? Does he kind of stay the same? Hopefully you want to see some improvement from your guy, but what does this matchup look like with a team that used to be Kirby Smart versus Nick Saban? Now it's going to be Kirby Smart versus Kalen DeBoer at Alabama.
Yeah, it's this is going to be interesting because this also could have some implications in the SEC, especially if Alabama turns out to be better than what I think people are, including myself, think that they're going to be. But like you said, I mean, Caleb DeBoer, coming from Washington, I know he lost in the national championship, but if he can turn Jalen Milroe into Michael Penix, if he can attribute what he did to Michael Penix into Jalen Milroe, that could be interesting. Jalen Milroe is a guy who has a lot of talent, but we all know what it's like for players to play under Nick Saban. You don't perform, you get taken out. That's basically how it goes. It happened to him last year. And then they also have Jam Miller as a running back, who's another athletic guy, actually, especially, or I should say, you have to be that athletic if you're going to play for a team like Alabama. But it's going to be interesting to see how those two go against each other and how Kalen DeBoer plays against a guy like Kirby Smart. You're not in Washington anymore. All right. You're playing with the big boys now. And you're playing, I don't want to say he's Nick Saban, but you're basically playing against the best team and the best coach now in the SEC. You're playing against, you have to coach against the best coach right now in the SEC against Kirby Smart. You have to play against the best team with Carson Beck and Trevor Etienne. So they're going to have their hands full. But if Kalen DeBoer can do what he did in Washington and, put some of that toward Alabama, I think this could be a very interesting game.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things where, his record speaks for itself and his resume and everything. But, I can't help but believe this is essentially the house that Saban built. He didn't have a large say in who was going to be taking over after he retired. So I think it maybe speaks a lot that, you did have Kalen DeBoer come in. The coaching search after Nick Saban made this announcement was, if I got this correct, maybe 72 hours if you're lucky. So, they kind of had things in place, if you will, and kind of probably a short list of maybe 2 to 3 guys that they were going to ask to take over for Nick Saban. So with his name being chosen, him being ushered in as the successor, it'll be interesting to see if he lives up to the hype, can do and bring the success he had at Washington over. Like you said, can he transform Milroe into a Penix-like player and have the success that he did? This is a week 5 matchup, so these teams do have the potential of being undefeated at this time as well. So, and potentially a top 10 matchup. It's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. And like you said, implications for the SEC could be on the line as, it goes back to this year's the first year with no divisions. You have Texas and Oklahoma coming in. So it's straight up, you got to purely win the division with your record. So, this game could have a lot of implications in both the National Football Playoff and the SEC as a whole.
100%.
We jump into the next matchup here as we have Clemson versus Florida State. And, I'm very interested to watch this matchup. I think this could be the best game in the ACC by far, with a lot of storylines here. When you look at it, the biggest one to me is you've got DJU for Florida State that used to play for Clemson and Dabo coming back. It is at Florida State, so he'll be at Florida State and not have to deal with that Clemson crowd. But I'm sure there's probably a very large number of players on that Clemson roster that he knows or, played with or was recruited with, things of that nature. But then you've got to think about the win that Florida State had last year on the road at Clemson in an overtime game at Death Valley. That was a big time matchup. And then for Clemson or Florida State to the way their season was ended, not getting put in the college football playoffs due to some, who knows what went into that season, but with them, losing their quarterback Jordan Travis late in the year and, them having a very great season, they could have some animosity and want to come out in this big time matchup that's going to be a mid-season game that could, like we said, with all these matchups, have implications to the conference. But then you have Dabo and Clemson that, he's done nothing but win since he's been there. And this will be probably their 5th game and 3rd against a top 25 team.
Yeah, I would have to completely agree with everything. It's going to be interesting. Like you said, DJU comes over. That's why I'm going to kind of pick FSU to win this game. That just has revenge story written all over it. He kind of felt like his talent was undermined a little bit at Clemson, and he's playing for a bigger team now. In my eyes, at least, FSU is a bigger team. I think they have way more talent. I think they've been a better team. So it's going to be interesting to see how Mike Norvell uses him in that FSU offense. But it's also going to be interesting to see how I would imagine it's going to be Cade Klubnik. It's probably going to be the starting quarterback for Clemson. I'm just really interested, like you said, Dabo Swinney, all he's done is win. But he also, he wins, but I feel like he doesn't win the games that he needs to win, like the big games. They don't perform in the big games. So it's going to be interesting to see if maybe, he can kind of turn it around and they can be one of those teams again, back like when they had Trevor Lawrence and, go to a national championship game, win a national championship, if they can be that type of team again. So yeah, I think it's going to have implications, even, being the 5th game, like you said. But it's definitely probably going to be a really good game. Definitely probably fireworks, I would imagine.
Yeah. If you look at Clemson's schedule leading up to this game, It's going to be an interesting schedule because they don't start the season off easy, as their week one matchup is against and at Georgia.
Oh, wow.
So they open the season with probably their toughest game of the year.
God dang.
Then they come back home, have Appalachian State at home, NC State at home. NC State is being projected as a top 25 team this year.
Yeah.
You've got Stanford at home, and then you go on the road to Florida State that had a really good season last year. Kind of feel like they got, cheated out of a spot in the playoffs,
100%.
and I'm sure they're going to be ready to go. So, and like you said, the storyline, DJU playing against his former coach and probably former teammates, it all adds up to, like you said, a lot of fireworks and what could be a very interesting game.
Agreed.
Next up on our list is another big time matchup in Texas versus Michigan. This is another, big early season game, as this is on September 7th, where Texas is going on the road. It's interesting to see. This is going to be one of those early games where it's going to be a prove it game for Texas. You're going to get up against, the reigning national champions, like we said, has a new coach. It is week 2, and depending on how Michigan comes out, they could challenge Texas. Texas, this could be an early loss for them. They got Colorado State week 1, and then you have to go on the road to the Big House. Not an easy environment to play at all. You got a veteran, experienced quarterback under center for you versus a team with a first-year head coach, new starting quarterback, new starting running back. This game has a lot of question marks for me, and it could be, I think, a game where Texas could come out and just kind of run away with it, or depending on how Michigan does, since this is early in the season, there's only going to be one week of game tape. Could Michigan come out and make this a close game and ground and pound against Texas?
100%. This is definitely going to be, like you said, this is going to be, it's early in the season, so this is going to be an important game for both sides. Obviously, it's a non-conference game, but like you said, the SEC, you're going to have to win that division with your record. And the Big Ten is going to be the same way, because it's no longer Michigan and Ohio State undefeated at the end of the year. It comes down to the last game of the year. Basically, loser doesn't get into the college football playoffs. Winner does. It's not going to be like that anymore. These guys, Michigan, these guys are going to have tougher schedules now. They're going to play better teams, more better teams. So, Ohio State's, they're going to end up playing Oregon. And this is just another example of that type of a game. These guys are going to have to come play Texas. We don't know what Michigan's going to be like. Are they going to be good? Are they not going to be good? How is Texas going to fare up to this point? Are they going to be able to come out and beat the defending national champions? It's going to be a very interesting game that potentially could have playoff implications, later on. It could make or break a season. I mean, you never know. Every game matters. So, and this is just another big game between two big teams.
Couldn't have said it better. I mean, that's true. And you don't really know what you're getting as far as Michigan. You know what you expect out of Texas with all their returners. And like you said, it could have implications. I mean, it is an expanded 12-team playoff. But, I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams vying for those top 12 spots, and just 1 to 2 losses could be the difference in do you get in or do you not. And this is a good early test for Michigan, but also on the flip side, a great early test for Texas to kind of come out and be like, okay, we're going to be on those top 5 teams that everybody is projecting us to be, and come out here and do our thing, and Quinn Ewers perform like a Heisman candidate like everybody expects him to.
Agreed.
Our next one is a game that could be very interesting as far as in terms of the SEC, where you've got Ole Miss and LSU. Ole Miss is, a team that at the end of last year and how they went about the transfer portal has very high expectations, and what they're calling could be a you know, playoff team, and they do go on the road to Death Valley to LSU. You know, this isn't going to be an easy game nonetheless, but they have the talented roster there. It's going to be interesting to see on the flip side that what does LSU look like under this next season with Brian Kelly. You know, he lost Jaden Daniels, the Heisman winner. You know, Garrett Nussmeier is expected to be the starter there, a guy that only has a handful of starts and playing time under his belt with a very talented LSU team that had really good recruiting. This could be another one of those teams where it could determine one of the top spots in the SEC if you're looking at potentially that third, fourth team in the SEC, and potentially better. I mean, Ole Miss could come out and surprise everybody with the talent that they come out, and I think it's a prove-it year for Lane Kiffin. You've got all this talent. What are you going to do with it? You've got Jackson Dart, a veteran quarterback, back. You went out and you got your tight end to stay. You went and got several top defensive transfers. They got one Arkansas's top linebacker, Chris Paul Jr., that transferred interdivisionally. They went out and got, I don't know how to pronounce his name 100%, Prince Ukamara from, I believe, Florida.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of talent on this team, and most of their offense are returners. So, I mean, this is Brian Kelly's third season at LSU. What is he going to do? But at the end of the day, the loser of this game, depending on how the rest of the season turns out, could still have a shot to reach the playoff with an at-large bid, but it'll be interesting to see how many SEC teams are in those 12 teams of the playoffs.
100% agree with you. Ole Miss and LSU, it's going to be interesting. Brian Kelly, and like you said, Garrett Nussmeier, not really a whole lot of experience, so it's going to be interesting to see how Brian Kelly, we kind of know what kind of coach Brian Kelly is. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how he fits in an LSU and how he fits Nussmeier into his type of offense. But as far as Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, we know exactly who he is, and Jackson Dart, I think. So this is why I think this game is going to be super interesting, because they could be 7-0 up to this point. They play Ole Miss starts the season off at Furman, then Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, GA Southern, Kentucky, South Carolina, and then LSU. So
I don't see a loss on that schedule.
So this could be a huge game for them, because then after that they play Oklahoma, Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, and then finish the year out at Mississippi State. So being 7-0 halfway through the season, I mean, that's huge. And then to beat a team like LSU, I mean, if you can go 8-0 and then, your one loss is to Georgia, I mean, that's impressive. And I would say that probably guarantees you a spot and the 12-team national college playoffs. So to be 7-0 up to that point and then have your first big test, because people are probably going to be talking like, oh, these guys have played nobody. This is their first big test, like they usually do. And if LSU comes out and they're good, like most, LSU has always had a decent team, I would say. Some years are better than others. So I think this is going to be Ole Miss's first real test on the season. But it could be huge implications for their season, because I would imagine they're going to be undefeated up to this point against LSU. So
that's true. I mean, and you talked about Ole Miss's schedule. If you look at LSU's coming into this game, they have some potential tough early tests where they open the season with USC, a team we just talked about that we don't really know what they're going to be, but they're another Power 5, where I guess it's Power 4 conference team now, that could potentially be good, or they could potentially be rebuilding. They play Nichols. That should be a win. South Carolina, most likely a win there. Then they have UCLA, another one of those teams that is coming over from the Pac-12 that could be good.
Yeah.
And then you got South Alabama and then this Ole Miss game. So there's potential of 2 losses there going into this game for LSU, or they could be undefeated as well and have better teams on their resume as far as if you're looking at, well, Ole Miss played nobody up until this point compared to where LSU's beaten USC, UCLA, South Carolina, SEC opponent. So I think there's a lot of storylines when you look at this game. Whereas, yes, it's a test for Ole Miss. LSU could be tested early depending on how these teams stack up. But yeah, I think it could be one of these teams has a shot to be in that playoff at large bid, especially like if you have Ole Miss, their one loss coming to Georgia, you're sitting there easily one of those top 6 teams in the, college football playoffs.
I 100% agree.
And then our last game here that has the chance to be a sneaky good game, Boise State versus Oregon. The Mountain West team versus the newly Big Ten team. I don't really know what to think about this matchup. It's going to be big. And, you have Boise State that does have UCLA transfer. I believe it's Malachi Nelson.
Yes.
As their starting quarterback. They're a very talented guy under a first-year head coach at Boise State, going up against Dan Lanning and this Oregon Duck team that was one of the top teams last year. It's going to be interesting.
100%. So Boise State, and I want to talk about this game just because, like you said, is very interesting, right? And it in my eyes, it's one of those sneaky games that I think Oregon could lose. And I know that's crazy that I'm even saying that. So the week after this, right, they will play Oregon State. So I think they might be focused on that big. I always have problems saying this word, rivalry. That game, that type of game. That's going to be in the back of their mind, right? Because the very next week they're going to be playing Oregon State. So if you guys don't know, you're about to. Boise State is undefeated against Oregon all time. They've never lost to Oregon. They've played them 3 times and they've won 3 times. They're 3-0 against Oregon. The last matchup came in the Las Vegas Bowl in 2017, where Boise State beat Oregon 38-28. So I think this has the potential to be one of those games where maybe Oregon thinks they're going to come in and just absolutely clobber these guys. And then Boise State, you always see those games where some terrible team plays against a really good team and they put up a fight you never thought was going to happen. And then they end up running away with it. The other team just can't hold on, or they can't fix their mistakes, and then they lose. And all I'm saying is that Boise State, they play 2 hard games in my mind on their whole season, and they play Oregon and Oregon State. Oregon is the second game of the season. Oregon State is the last game of the season. Other than that, I wouldn't be surprised if they win every other game on their schedule. So, if they could beat Oregon, you're talking there's a potential of these guys going to the last game undefeated.
That would be
interesting.
That would be very interesting. It's one of those things, too, when you think about Boise State, they're projected along with Fresno State to be one of the top teams in the Mountain West. Oregon, you have them coming in and being one of the newcomers to the Big Ten. This is, like you said, a week 2 game, early test for both these teams. And this is going to be a late one. If you want to stay up and watch it, it kicks off at 9:00 on Peacock. So, you're getting your traditional Pac-12 games that this would be 7:00 start time. But, it's going to be a later game. And like you said, Oregon could be looking ahead, being like, okay, I've got Boise State this week. They're Boise State. We'll probably win this game, but we've got Oregon State, our big rivalry matchup next week. And like you said, Boise State's one of those teams that if you try to overlook them, then it hasn't went well in the past. And that overall record versus them, it'll be interesting to see how this one shakes out, especially with Boise State having a new quarterback, new coach. You don't know what to expect. And with this being a week 2 game, you're not going to have a lot to go off of, because Boise State plays Georgia Southern week 1. And I'm sure they're probably not going to show a lot in that game if they can get the win without, having to dive deep in that playbook. And then you have Oregon playing Idaho week 1. Neither of these teams are going to have a lot to go off of when you're talking about film and game prep and things like that. So it could be a potential, early season upset. And if Oregon does lose this game, that could really hurt their chances for the college football playoffs.
I would agree, and I think, like you said, being the second game of the season, and like you just mentioned, I think what you just mentioned was huge. Not a whole lot of game film. I think you can watch any game that Oregon's ever played in the last 15 years, and they basically run the same offense. I mean, they are literally fast, high-powered type of offense. They've always been like that. And I think that this no film actually works to Boise State's advantage. Oregon not really not playing these guys since 2017, not really, different, like you said, different head coach, different quarterback. Everything's kind of changed. It's early in the season. A lot of mistakes get made early in the season. If Boise State was going to ever have an upset, they could not have picked a better time to play these guys. Early in the season, big game for Oregon the week after. Not a whole lot of game film to go off of. I mean, everything. If you were talking about an upset, this is literally fitting the picture. So I'm not saying they will, but this is perfect for them.
The only thing missing here is this game is not being played on that beautiful blue field in Boise.
Yeah, that would. You might as well just go ahead and write Oregon a loss if that was actually happening. So
I was about to say, could you imagine that green and yellow of Oregon contrasting on that blue field? You talk about wild colors in this matchup with, Boise could come out in their bright oranges. You have Oregon in some type of bright, flashy color on a blue field. Man, what crazy. An opportunity to make your head hurt watching a football game.
Yeah, you're not lying.
And as we kind of wrap up here, some other news. One of the big news in college football for a team that, he could be in a key piece for Ollie Gordon for Oklahoma State, was picked up and arrested a few weeks ago on a DUI charge. He had some open containers in his vehicle. No disciplinary action has been announced yet for him, but, depending on how long he could be, I don't see how he's not suspended for at least, 1 to 2 games minimum, potentially more. I don't know how those situations are, if they're kind of left up to the university to make those decisions, or if it's kind of an NCAA ruling. I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but it could be interesting to see how that could affect Oklahoma State's season.
Yeah, so I know that when we had ranked the teams, right, we had talked about Oklahoma as being a tough team, a potentially tough team this year. I don't think we had them ranked in our top 10, but I know that we had them, they could be one of those teams that comes out of nowhere because there's a lot of talent there. But I would imagine, if I had to guess, when I read up on it, the teams that they knew about it and they were going over, what had happened. But I would imagine there's going to be some huge discipline taken here. This is a guy who was going 17 miles an hour over the speed limit. He was swerving over the road, and whenever he blew in the breathalyzer, he blew twice. He blew a .10 and a .11, which is over the legal limit. Legal limit's .08, so he technically was charged with a DUI. So to have a guy last year, to have a guy on your team who's your superstar player, who ran for over 1,700 yards and 21 touchdowns and was the Doak Walker Award winner, that hurts, especially when you're coming into this season with some talent and you're hoping to, some teams have cleared up from your conference and you're hoping to be that team and potentially bust your way inside that college playoff. Now that, there is 12 teams. It's not just, there's, you just got 8 more chances to make your way in there. So in my eyes, that was a very poor decision on his part. Obviously, I know these are just kids, but that is unacceptable. And I think that hurts the team more than anything. That just hurts the team. But yeah, I would imagine, if not 1 to 2 games, I would imagine it's going to be more than that.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like you said, I think I honestly, and you might have too, they're one of my picks to win the Big 12 this year. When you look at the rest of that conference, like you said, you have Texas, Oklahoma leaving, who has been the majority of that conference championship to a team that now, they've got their entire offensive line is redshirt seniors returning. They got a returning quarterback that is an experienced guy, talented wide receivers, and a star running back like this. And then you go out and, get in trouble like this. It's going to be interesting to see what that disciplinary action is. As an Arkansas fan, I would love to see him be out week 2 because, we have them on the road at week 2. So, that would be one less thing for us to have to worry about. But when it's all said and done, you've got to be more responsible than this. Like you said, they are kids, but, they are in a spotlight, if you will. Mm-hmm. And, that things that some, normal person, it might not be as big of a deal. Yes, DUIs are a bigger deal, but it's not going to be as highlighted as, a top athlete for one of these universities that media is going to take this and run with it. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to this. I did see where they announced he will be going with Oklahoma State to the media days. He will be one of the players that is being taken to media days. So I'm sure this question will probably come up. I mean, how does it not?
Yeah.
And the answer will be interesting to see what Mike Gundy says when he gets asked about that. And, whether it's in one of those interviews where it's him and the players, or if it's just the interview with the coach, what that response is going to be. And, if Ollie Gordon himself has something to say, regarding the incidents and what happened.
Yep. Biggest thing is you hope that they can learn from it and then obviously not reciprocate those mistakes that were made. So, but yeah, definitely hurts Oklahoma more than anything, or Oklahoma State more than anything, especially since we both picked them to win that conference. So this could have, if he's out for a couple weeks or whatever, now you're talking, I don't know, because, that's a huge part of their offense. So it puts another question mark on another conference in college football. So
it's very true. So we highlighted some of the top games that we are expecting this season. We'll continue to talk about topics like this. Do you have anything else before we wrap up and get out of here, Dylan?
I do not.
So that being said, we're still going to continue every couple weeks for the show until we get closer to college football. It's almost here. We're down to just a few days before NCAA 25 gets here. So, we'll have fun playing that until the actual college football is here. Shoot us on Twitter, your messages or questions, anything you want us to talk about, whatever you want to hear from us. You can catch me every week on Hogs on the Hill. You can find that on Twitter, YouTube, if you want some Arkansas content. And, it's going to be a fun college football season, and I can't wait for it and to have more fantastic shows ahead of us.
Yeah, super excited for the season. So just hold on. We're almost there. It's this close. We're this close.
And with that, we'll see you guys next time on Saturday Showdown.